Fam, Vice President Kamala Harris was in Atlanta today, meeting with national civil rights leaders about the importance of voting. This is, of course, her leaving Air Force Two after it landed there in Atlanta. The conversation took place at the Gathering Place, and of course, which is a Black-owned establishment. They were there, again, talking about what really is one of the most crucial issues facing us today. You see right there, those were a lot of the photos that took place there. We had reached out to find out if they were going to be actually live streaming the event. We normally would be carrying that on Roland Martin Unfiltered, but they had not done so. But again, at that particular event, she was talking about, again, how critical this election is, and what we actually are going to have to do to fight those who are trying to keep us from voting. Cliff Albright, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, was in that meeting. He joins us right now. Cliff, glad to have you here. I can tell you meet with the vice president because I can't tell you the last time you came on the show dressed in a suit and tie. So I'm like, did Cliff come from church? What's up? All right, so tell us what happened.
Yeah, I had to put on my Sunday best. But, thanks for having me, Roland. Yeah, I mean, it was a good conversation, right? You had folks in the room, and it was a good combination of Georgia organizations, some of our friends and partners, folks like New Georgia Project and Helen from People's Coalition for People's Agenda, and then some national organizations as well. And, it was just a good discussion. The vice president, laid out some of the issues that she wanted to hear about. And really the conversation was centered on security issues around security and intimidation that we know has been taking place and that we expect to increase over the next 10 months or so. Disinformation, right? We know that that's an increasingly big part of what's going to be going on. We know the way that Black voters are often targeted with disinformation. And so she wanted to have a conversation around that and what suggestions we have on things that the administration can do to help with that. You may have seen, Roland, already. You already got some of these Black influencers out there that are, under the belt of these conservatives spreading messages around why Black folks don't need to vote in this presidential election, right? So they're already started with the disinformation. So we got to be prepared to counter that. And certainly Black-owned media like you is a big part of that. And then the third piece that, she wanted to talk about was, just suggestions on what's working. What are the outreach mechanisms that are working? What do we suggest? And again, what ways can the administration be more helpful? So, it's an ongoing conversation, and the vice president shared some things, talking about some things that the administration has done, particularly on some of these security issues, things that the Department of Justice has done. And Roland, you and I know we've talked about like some of the great work that Kristen Clark has been doing with civil rights in the Department of Justice, not just on police accountability, but today we talked about some things that they've done around some of these security and voter intimidation, and particularly around intimidation of poll workers, right? And so they've been very active on that issue, and we expect for that to increase. So it was a good, substantive discussion, and we're looking forward to, and it's not going to be the last. She'll be back in Georgia and having some other conversations, some other places around the importance of these voting rights issues.
Well, now, was this a public gathering? Was it a private one? Was it off the record? Describe the meeting.
Yeah, it was, there was a brief 2-minute statement that she made at the start where press was available for, but the event, the round table discussion, which is what they were calling it, with all these voter mobilization and voting rights, the actual conversation itself was a private conversation. Press was not in the room for that. As you mentioned, it was not being live streamed. And so that was just really a talk amongst folks who are expressing, concerns and suggestions on how we need to deal with these issues that I just outlined.
And look, I mean, the reality is, they understand, look, they've got a significant problem. There were a group of Black women who met with President Biden talking about what they have to do. There have been Black men who met with the vice president also laying out these issues. The Democratic Campaign Congressional Committee announced today they're going to be spending $35 million this election cycle, specifically targeting Black, Latino, Asian, and other minority voters. Bottom line is they see their polling numbers, and if they rely on Black voters. And look, there's a lot of stuff that they've actually done. But what we know and understand is that it's a lot of things that they have not messaged properly on. And I think, and I've heard this from senior administration officials, that they did a whole lot when you look at Inflation Reduction Act, when you look at CARES Act, and we could go on and on and on, and they were passing things, but they were not using the bully pulpit to walk people through to understand what they were actually doing to benefit regular, ordinary folks.
Yeah, and in some cases, not only were they not using the bully pulpit to do that, but then what you saw happening, and you've talked about this on your show, is you got Republicans out there then having town halls and messaging and putting in their newsletters, spending that's taking place on some infrastructure stuff that they're taking credit for, even though, as you know, not a single one of them voted for it, particularly in the House. And so yeah, there's definitely a messaging gap, and part of that has to be dealt with in terms of doing a better, and some of it, Roland, is because of what you talked about. There's actually been a lot of things that have been done, some of which, much of which specifically benefits Black communities, right? Infrastructure, climate change, right? Even student debt cancellation, which is not taking place based on the president's original plan, but is still taking place at some historic levels. I got folks calling me up every other week talking about they got this amount of debt, canceled, and that amount of debt canceled. And so some of it is because there's been so much that sometimes you can get lost just in the different things that have been done. And Democrats are really bad because they want to get into the policy and the nuances and all that. And, whereas the other side, oftentimes they're just real basic with their messaging. And so there's a messaging issue in terms of what is the message. There's also an issue in terms of how frequently it's put out there. Like, how much are you touching Black voters to deliver these messages? And then, as you know, where are you delivering these messages? Are you delivering it in the right places? Are you delivering it on Black Star Network? Are you delivering it on other Black media? And so it's what's the message, how frequently you're doing it, and where are you doing it? And when they can really get focused on that, and then which other groups, which local groups are you supporting to help them deliver some of these messages, right? When they can really deal with those four issues, then I think that, the messaging problem will get a little bit better. And of course, as the closer you get to an election, the better it gets. But part of what we always say at Black Voters Matter is you shouldn't have to wait until after the Democratic convention in August. You shouldn't have to wait till September or October. That messaging has to start yesterday, right? Not even today. That message is needed to start yesterday. So there's got to be improvement on all that. But the irony is that they've actually got some substance that they can talk about. Not everything that we want, and then some things that where they've really fallen short. But there's a lot of substance that's been done, and they've just got to find a way to message better around it.
Absolutely. And look, you have people who are angry, who are upset, who are bitter. Even we talked about before what has taken place between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians there. When I post things, people started going off and saying all kinds of different stuff. And a lot of it's BS. A lot of it's BS. A lot of it is just folks who complain about anything and everything. But I do believe, though, and I say this all the time, we talk about elections. And it trips me out when I hear these people who say, oh, I'm going to vote third party. We got to have a third party, or I'm just not going to vote at all. And I just keep reminding them. I said, I'm telling you right now, somebody's going to win. And I can guarantee you, and I've looked at Project 2025, all the Republicans are saying, you got Donald Trump out here, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, saying he doesn't have a problem if the economy crashes in the next 12 months. They literally want to see America go through hell. And I've yet to see anything, and I know there's people out there in the hood talking about the stimmies and all the checks and the money that came when Trump was in there, passed by Congress, led by Democrats in the House. But Republicans, they plan on cutting everything. So all the people who somehow think checks are going to start raining down on the Black community if Trump gets in, they are delusional.
Yeah, not only the delusional, not only is that not going to happen, but the exact opposite is going to happen. You're going to see massive disinvestment from the black community. And guess what? This isn't like hyperbole and this isn't conspiracy. It's already happening. Think about like the things that's on like the Republican platform. They're against affirmative action and DEI, right? They if you weren't clear about that, then certainly the actions over the past couple of weeks in terms of Claudine Gay and all of these attacks that we're seeing on DEI. So they're against affirmative action and DEI. That's what? That's economic. That's actually dollars in our pocket when you take that away. They're against money for black farmers. They're against money for HBCUs. They're against increasing the living wage, particularly in cities that are often, disproportionately black. Even when those cities have actually voted for it, they block it, right? That's money in our pockets is being taken away. They're against decreasing the price of insulin, even though black communities are disproportionately impacted by diabetes. So that's a health issue, but that's also what? That's an economic issue. Issue after issue, these are economic issues that are impacting our pockets, our quality of life, yes, our rights, our civil rights, but also like our economic well-being. And so the kind of disinvestment that you're talking about, later for some stimulus checks, which, as you said, he wasn't even for, his party was against, and then when he couldn't stop it, then he says, oh, well, put my name on it. And then we get fooled into thinking that that's something that he actually made happen. So the levels of disinvestment that our communities will see, this is not a game. This is not a joke. And that's before we even get into the other issues around civil rights, voting rights, the attacks on Black history, the attacks on abortion rights, and all these other issues. So whether you look at it from the economic perspective or whether you look at it from the social, civil rights, voting rights perspective, another 4 years of that would be absolutely disastrous. And those who say that, well, we made it through the first 4, they don't have an understanding of what, if you put an emboldened Trump and an emboldened Republican Party back in control after everything that they did illegally, after all of the racism, right, after all of the attacks on our economic well-being, if you put them back in there, it will be an entirely different ball game.
So, Cliff, what do you say? Final question for you. What do you say to these people who go, oh, man, y'all just scared tactics. Y'all just using scare tactics. And you just trying to sit here and cape for the Dems and you want to support them. People say that stuff, and I go, no. It's not a scare tactic. I'm telling you what the hell's going to happen.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's not a scare tactic when it's facts, right? We talk about you got receipts, right? There's actually receipts on all this. So it's not a scare tactic. Now, with that said, I do agree with this. We can't just speak to our people from a perspective of how bad things can get. We can't just speak to our people from a perspective of just fear and being afraid. We've always got to speak to our communities around, all this is going on, and this is what their plan is, and this is what they did, and this is what they want to do. But guess what? We've got the power to change all that. We've got the power not just to keep the bad stuff from happening, but for fighting for an entirely different vision of what this society can look like, what our communities could look like, what our communities could look like with investment, with economic opportunities, with history, with education, with all these things, with police accountability. We've got to speak to our folks from a perspective of love and perspective of hope and a perspective of power, not conceptually, but in terms of like some real substance and some real issues. When we can have those kinds of discussions, then what our history shows is our people will respond. But it takes time to have those discussions. It takes work to have those discussions, and it takes resources to have those discussions.
And I'll say this here, and we had on the brother who's the co-founder of the Black and Brown summit, the debate in Iowa. No Republicans are showing up to that. And here's the deal. Republicans don't call Black Voters Matter to sit down and talk about issues. And so when I hear these people say, well, they're all the same, well, I can tell you this here. You can actually have conversations at the White House with Biden or with Vice President Kamala Harris. Republicans, they don't invite us. And if I got to pull a video up, I will show Black people the crazy Black people they had, like Raynard Jackson and that other nutcase girl out of Atlanta. They have folk at the table who don't know Black folk know or respect.
That's right. And at the end of the day, like you said, Roland, you've got to be able to have those discussions. You've got to be able to disagree with folks sometimes and be able to be in a space with them where you can tell them, look, we disagree. You got to be in a space with folks where you can tell them, look, you've done some good things, but guess what? We need you to do some more, right? And so that's part of what that's part of what accountability is like. It doesn't mean that you only support folks that are right 100% of the times, that are with you 100% of the time, that you never have disagreements with, but you got to at least be in discussion so that you can have that accountability, so that you can call them in. I won't say call them out, but to call them in. And when you got some folks that are running on anti-blackness, you can't have that discussion. But when you've got somebody like this administration, like a vice president, that will come and sit down and have that discussion, then you've got a chance to actually use your influence and we can actually show situations where we've been able. I'm saying we as a movement have been able to move them on certain things, where they've actually moved to the left, where they've been more aggressive on some positions, where it came out belatedly, but eventually Biden came out against the filibuster to get voting rights. It took them too long to do it, but you got to be in discussion to even make that happen. We can't have that discussion with some folks that are literally running on anti-blackness. So no, we can't make perfection the enemy of the good. That doesn't mean that you don't call people in, that you don't hold them accountable, that you don't have some hard discussions. That's a part of what this process is like.
Absolutely. Cliff Albright, appreciate it, my brother.
All right, appreciate you.
Thanks a bunch. Folks, going to a break. We'll be right back on Roland Martin Unfiltered right here on the Black Star Network.